Welcome back to the Mission 43 podcast. Our guest today is Tony Liles. He spent 24 years in the United States Army, retired as an E9 Sergeant Major, and really walked a remarkable path.
It's incredible. It always wasn't easy for him, but I was really inspired by the way he accepted help and now is doing fantastic and has had a successful transition here in Idaho. So
yeah, absolutely. And not only did he accept help when he needed it as a leader at that point in his career, but since then, even as a civilian, he continues to share his story and help others get the help they need when they need it.
Absolutely. Hit subscribe, and we're looking forward to you joining us in this conversation.
Join us in learning about the stories and the people who inspire us. This is the Mission 43 podcast. I'm Dan Nelson.
And I'm Brian Madden. Idaho is our home. The military is what we did.
Here with Sergeant Major Tony Liles. Thanks for being here, man.
Man, it's great to be here. It's great to be here. It's great to be able to give to this mission, to give to this organization that's done so much for me. So thanks for having me.
You've been a part of it for a while, right?
Since 2000. I joined in 2018 when I was about a year out from the Army. I heard about Mission 43.
How'd you hear about it, by the way?
I was actually scrolling Facebook, and I saw it come up. I was looking up, like, military members in Idaho, and Mission 43 came up, and then I saw a familiar face on the at one of the events, and I was like, hey, this is I know that person. And then I just started researching the organization and found out about what the organization does, what it stands for, and I was like, that's something I need to join.
You were active duty and you were out of state when you were
Yeah, I was stationed in Colorado, Fort Carson, Colorado at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So you're starting to, at that time when you joined Mission 43, you're starting to think about what was next, what was the plan at that point?
Exactly.
Yeah.
How was I going to navigate what we call the real world? Scared as hell, but how was I going to navigate it? So,
How many years were you in the Army?
24 years, 6
24?
months, and 4 days.
Yeah.
Who's counting?
Me.
What'd you do in the Army?
I was an aviation professional. I did everything from aviation operations to crew chief with CH-47 crewing and ALSI, aviation life support equipment. I did everything except fly a helicopter.
No, that's why I like you, because you're not a pilot, probably.
Let's keep talking about Chinooks. We're on to something here.
Yeah,
Of
fastest
course.
aircraft in the Army inventory.
When did you join the Army?
I joined the Army 27 March 1995.
Well, like, how old were you?
18.
Okay, so you joined pretty much like right out of high school?
I went to right out of high school, went to college for a semester, and things didn't work out, so I needed to do something.
What state were you in?
North Carolina.
Okay.
Everyone joins the Army
Yes.
in North Carolina.
We do.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yes, we do.
So started 18-year-old, like, young man, and then 24 years later in 6 months and however many days, you make this switch to what you're saying, like the real world, right?
Yeah.
So you did some things. You were at least looking ahead. How did you settle on Idaho?
Well, I got stationed here in 2005 to be an advisor for the National Guard and Reserve.
Okay.
Active duty advisor for all aviation assets west of the Mississippi.
Okay.
So fell in love with the Valley, met my wife when I was here, and decided it was a great place to raise a family, to come back to.
Well, in 24 years, you probably had some deployments, right?
4 deployments.
Where to?
I did three combat deployments to Iraq, 1 combat deployment to Afghanistan, and before the global war on terror kicked off, I did some work in Mongolia and Uzbekistan.
Oh, really? What was it like? So you were in before 9/11. Like, what was the switch?
Man, the switch was rough. I mean, because it was all the Russian threat.
Yep.
That's what T-72s and
That will never come back.
yeah. What Mark Twain say? History doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme.
Yep.
But yeah, it was man. You talk about a culture shift.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my whole career I was trained on the Russian threat, and then or the Soviet Union then, and then to go to the global war on terror with insurgents and the insurgency. It was a huge paradigm shift. And it's like we had to shift while being there.
Yeah.
When did you first deploy?
My first deployment was, that was February 2003, the initial invasion into Iraq.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Where were you then?
The first time I was based out of Talil Air Base, first deployment, and then we moved up to Najaf during that deployment.
Crazy time?
It was wild because it was like we thought things were over, and so I was in 82nd Airborne Division then. And
All the way?
Airborne. And we were told that, hey, things are done. We're good to go. We're going home.
Yeah.
And no shit, I packed up. We went home, and 90 days later, after being home, I was back in Iraq.
Really?
Yes.
Just a little teaser of home?
And the teaser of home, 3 months, long enough to get some block leave in and to get our containers back, equipment back. Actually, I did not even clean my equipment in between deployments.
Really? So then the insurgency kicks off. They realize, obviously, and on all their military wisdom, that we got to get one back. They send you back. And then how long were you there during that portion, like 2003-ish, 4-ish?
Yeah, I went back. Actually came home in 2003, went back in 2003, and spent another year in Iraq. And that time I was right outside Fallujah.
And how old were you then, your first deployment?
Man, my first deployment, I was 26. My second deployment, I was 27.
Were you married at the time?
First marriage, yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Did it fall victim, or I'm sure
Yeah,
it
it
wasn't
fell
helped
victim.
by the deployment?
It definitely fell victim. It was definitely a deployment divorce.
Yeah. Did you have kids from your first marriage?
None,
No.
thankfully.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't home enough to make them.
Yeah. And then, so your wife was from Idaho. You met when you were here on active duty, and she was open to leaving and going to
Fort Hood, Texas, man.
married
Leading
to
the jewel of the
yeah.
Southwest.
Yes.
You're still married to her?
Yeah. She lasted through that, man. It
Yeah.
was definitely. She it's funny. She spent about a month down in Texas after I deployed because we got there. We got to Texas, man. We got married in February. Left here in May, and I left to go to Iraq again in August. And she left Texas in September and came back to Idaho.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, that's rough. So your last deployment then was to Afghanistan.
Yeah, the last one was Afghanistan, 2015-16.
Okay. And at what point did you realize you weren't doing awesome as a person, even though you're a sergeant major, you're an E9, you've climbed the ranks, you've been in, you probably could have retired about that point, right?
Yeah, I was over 20 years at that time, and it was like when I found out I was going to that unit and I was going to deploy, I knew that was it. I felt like, this is going to be it. I'm not making it home. I'm okay with that because I have so many people that, didn't make it home. So why should I make it home? Dealing with like survivor's guilt. Well, I made it home, and I got home, it was 2016. It was September 2016 I got home.
Mm-hmm.
And first deployment I ever had where everyone made it home. And so it should have been like, great time. But October 19th, 2016, one of my soldiers took his own life. And I knew why he did it. I understood it because I had a plan to do the same thing. I was done, and I ain't want to be here no more. I was tired of dealing with the pain. I was tired of dealing with all of that, the demons, and just it was too much to bear.
Yeah. Let me ask you, before the deployment, sorry to interrupt you, but before the deployment, you had that feeling, like that fatalistic feeling that you knew you weren't coming back.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? Because I'm familiar with that feeling.
It crept up on me. I remember I got orders to go to Fort Carson. I was in Savannah, and I got orders, command selection list to go be the sergeant major for 2nd Battalion, 4th Aviation. And I knew they was on the patch chart to go to Afghanistan. And I just had that feeling that with the current administration, with the troop limits that we had in Afghanistan, I knew I would be crewing, I knew I'd be flying missions, and I just felt that it was fate. And I knew that was, I felt like I deserved it because one of the first female 58 pilot that died in Iraq, I was on the radio with her when she got shot down. Another great American I served with, Aaron Weaver, he had a great story. He had beat testicular cancer. And we were in 82nd. He wanted to deploy. It was like, no, you need to stay back so you can get through all your post-cancer treatments and checkups. He was like, no, I'm going with my unit. So he did the research and found out he can get the checkups that needed to get done in Baghdad. I was the one that put him on the aircraft so he can get what needed to be done so he can come back and for a big mission that we had coming up. But he didn't make it back. So I felt like with all of that, it was my time to.
Who did you're a sergeant major, I think.
Yeah.
Can't underestimate, like, you've reached the pinnacle in the non-commissioned officer side. So it gets lonelier. What did you do to get through that?
I did nothing.
Huh.
It was a crazy story. My best friend was the battalion commander. We became seriously, like, it was a command team that was like no other.
Yeah.
We were locked at the hip. And he knew after James' suicide that I wasn't right. He knew something was wrong. He knew something was off. So I never forget one night at the battalion headquarters, our behavior health officer walked into my office like at 1800 with Mike Stoll. Mike walked him in. Mike walked out, closed the door. Behavior health officer sat down in front of my desk and said, "Sergeant Major, we know something's not right. What's going on?" And that's the biggest thing for me is that, Mike went and got me help because I didn't believe that. I actually thought it was weak to seek help.
Even though probably at that point you'd been sending soldiers to get help, right? And telling them, do the right thing, go get yourself help if you need it, probably.
Exactly. And I'm like, I'm cut from a different cloth. I've already deployed a couple of times. I'm good.
Yeah.
And
were you open to talking to this, I'm assuming, someone you really don't know well?
Well, man, for me, it was life-changing because that behavior health officer, Damian McCabe, I deployed with him. So I actually talked with him and took a lot of soldiers to see him, and he got it. He was phenomenal. The level of trust that I had with him, it was just a perfect situation because I would not have trusted anyone else but him.
So you got effective mental health care while you were still in the Army.
Yes.
And how long were you in treatment? Was it like cognitive behavioral therapy?
Yep.
Or
I did 24 months of cognitive behavior therapy followed by another year of post-traumatic growth.
Did they leave you in the sergeant major position?
Yes.
Going through that? So did that affect your career at all?
Not at all. It was true. I mean, my brigade commander, brigade sergeant major, they knew what was going on, and it was like as if I was getting treatment for my knees.
Yeah.
I did everything. I was everything that I expected my soldiers to be. I was still there, and I had great support.
When did you start talking about it, like to your soldiers, or did you ever?
I did. I actually did around my last year at Carson. I spoke to brigades about the strength in getting help. That was probably, I would say, that was more rewarding to me than actually being selected and graduating the Sergeant's Major Academy. Is standing in front of 4,000 steely-eyed some of America's greatest, and tell them, you too can get help. It's okay getting help. Help is going to make you stronger. You can get through this. And I became like the poster child.
Why do you think leaders in general, whether it's NCOs or officers, have such a hard time crossing that threshold, like getting help or admitting that they need help?
I know for us, it was like our generation, we had that generational gap where we grew up in the 80s. We grew up on bicycles. We didn't grow up with iPads and iPhones. We might have had a Nintendo, but we were taught to be tough. Man, don't cry. We don't show our emotions. We were in that generation. And then the next thing you know, the global war on terror kicks off, and we're deploying every other year, if not every 6 months, every 90 days, depending on what organization you're in. Well, those things first learned are those things that's remembered the most. And I think it's hard for us because the generation we came up in where, for me, growing up in rural North Carolina, I knew a lady, I didn't know she had schizophrenia, but I knew she was off. And I remember my grandmother saying, "Oh, stay away from Yvonne. She's having one of them spells." So for me, growing up in rural North Carolina, there was a stigma with mental health.
Yeah, you're crazy.
You're crazy.
Yeah.
Yep. And so it was, I think that and the generation, that's why it was so hard for us.
I heard actually fairly recently something that really resonated with me about PTSD, that it's wrong the way we talk about it, because like the actual diagnosis of PTSD, just in general, veteran or not, is fear-based. Like, you're always startling, you're scared of everything, you're basically scared of the impending whatever bad thing is going to happen to you. But in reality, I think a lot of people, a lot of veterans especially, suffer more from like guilt and shame than they do fear.
Yeah.
What was it for you, do you think?
Me, it was guilt.
Yeah.
It was a lot of guilt. It was a lot of shame. Survivor's guilt is rough.
Yeah.
I mean, still, Kimberly Hampton, they named an elementary school after her there at Fort Bragg. I still haven't been able to visit it because of guilt. And I think it's so many layers to it.
Yeah.
What's the balance as a leader? You're still the sergeant major of a battalion. You've got this responsibility, but you've got this thing going on inside. Like you can't focus, you can't go 100% over there, or else the job you've been given is going to fail. So like, how do you balance what you're going through as a leader?
I shared we had so an aviation command team, you actually have 3 instead of 2. So you have your commander, your sergeant major, and you have a senior warrant. And that became a circle. They knew what I was dealing with. They knew what I was going through. And I tell you, Scott Nally and Mike Stoll, those 2 great Americans, we're still tight today. That was my way. And I had a great brigade sergeant major also who knew what I was dealing with. And so I had great leadership that was there that enabled me to continue to still be that senior enlisted advisor and to serve my soldiers. And it actually allowed me to relate to a lot of what my soldiers were going through.
Were you able to still do your job as effectively as what your potential is, or do you think it was impacted?
I think I did it better.
Yeah.
I think I became a better leader because now I had tools to deal with, to understand when I got triggered, to deal with some of the thoughts, feelings, and emotions that I was going through at the time. I can identify them. Instead of being the sergeant major that flew off the handle, I was more stoic. It allowed me to be a better leader because now I'm aware.
Yeah.
So that awareness allowed me to become a better leader because of it.
How did it affect things both before you sought treatment and after in your personal life, like with your family? Because you're married, you have kids.
Man, I tell you what, it was crazy because like when I dealt with things, my first episodes with trauma, they all happen at night. So I didn't know it, but I would not allow like my kids, we don't go out at night. We're going to get home before nightfall. I didn't know that at the time. And like, so I remember, I think it was like one night we was out, my son, I think he was about 5 years old, and he started freaking out because he had never ridden in a vehicle at night. And that was because I didn't allow my family to be out at night. I didn't allow my wife to go to the grocery store at night. We were getting to an argument about, why are you going to the store at night? You don't need to go tonight. I go tomorrow on my way home. And it was like, you don't go out at night.
Yeah.
And then it went from, that to like, oh, you're going to the grocery store? Okay. I'll see you when you get back. Oh, can you pick this up while you're there? And so it starts to change those things. It was hard for me to be at home by myself with my kids for a while because I just couldn't handle it.
Right. I mean, you're definitely not alone in that. In Mission 43, we do have a program we call Operation Resilient Path that helps veterans and first responders that are struggling from PTSD, substance use disorder, traumatic brain injury, and usually it's a mix of at least a couple of those.
Yeah.
Did you have any issues with abusing substances during that period in your life?
I abused alcohol a lot.
Yeah.
And a whole lot. And no substance abuse. And that's because of part of my upbringing. I mean, I tell people, hey, I'm the product. My father was a crack cocaine addict, so I would not touch drugs. I mean, I know how it ruined his life. He died when I was 16 because of his involvement with drugs. So that's one thing that no matter what I went through, I know drugs is like a snake. It can be a beautiful thing. It can make you feel good, but you know what it's going to do to you before you mess with it.
But hey, good people drink alcohol, right?
Yes, we do.
Well, but at that same
Yeah.
time, I'm guessing over the course of 24 years and those type of deployments building up and that guilt, building up, were you using it then too, or is it just during the period?
I was at I remember, man, when I got back from Afghanistan, we had our house, we had a basement, and it was a garden level basement, so it was just a few windows, but not a lot, but it was nice and dark. And that was my favorite thing, was to go downstairs after everyone else in the house is asleep, and to be downstairs in the dark by myself with me and my bottle. Mm-hmm. That was where I wanted to be.
It's a lonely position. Do you now, like, you're the dude around town we see all the time, Mission 43 events, you work for the city of Boise, you're objectively successful as both husband, father, and professional. And do you talk about this story with other people? Like,
Yeah.
Are you open with it?
I'm open with it. I tell them my struggles. I'm open with it because I feel like if I share my struggles, it can help someone else who's going through something similar. I don't want anyone to see Tony Liles and think, oh, it's been an easy path. I struggled with employment. I struggled with post-traumatic stress, and I tell you why I don't put a D on the end of it. And it's not easy, but I didn't quit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I just kept grinding because it's what you got to do. We owe it to those that didn't make it home to keep moving forward. And that's why I want to be at those events. That's why I want to be there, because I want to help someone else that's going through a tough time know that, hey, you can come out of this. You can make it. You just got to apply yourself. You just got to keep going. You got to find those opportunities and surround yourself with the right people like Mission 43.
Yeah. When you were looking online, you said before you left Colorado, like what were you looking for in Idaho? You were looking for a veterans organization, and just what were you seeking when you got here?
Man, I was looking for any kind of help I could find because I was scared. I ain't gonna lie. I had spent my whole adult life in the Army. That's all I knew. When I was leaving the Army in 19, I was 43 years old, and I was 42 when I found Mission 43.
And what resources did you use? Like, what did you?
Yeah, I reached out to Mission 43, got the nice packet and the welcome packet and everything, and just knew that I would have an opportunity to network. And so I used one of the it was a federal hiring seminar that Mission 43 had put on about how to write resumes, how to navigate the federal hiring process. And I think it was a 2-day class at the time, or it was a whole day class, but it was a great class right there at JCAF. And I learned so much during that class. And not only did I learn, I'll never forget Nicole Wagner. She's about this tall. She looked at me and said, "Sergeant Major, you're not getting anything because you're too damn humble. We need to redo this resume and tell your story." And that's when I started getting called back, started getting interviews, and getting employed.
That's awesome. Did you feel like or do you still feel, because it hasn't been that long, 2019 you got out of the Army, did you have a loss of identity, or did you just move right in? And
I had a loss of identity for a moment because I wanted to continue to serve.
Yeah.
And so, I chose a job in which I thought I could make a difference, but it was too big of a bureaucratic organization to make a difference.
Got it.
So I moved on somewhere else where I could make a difference, and actually came back. I had a spell for almost 2 years where I really wasn't involved with Mission 43, and now I came back, and now it's like I can make a difference. I can continue to serve in another capacity. And so that's why, my identity will never go away, because I'm still with my brothers and sisters in arms. We're just wearing different clothes.
Yeah. What would you say if someone's watching or listening right now that's struggling like we have? What would you say? What advice would you give them right now?
You don't have to walk alone. You're not alone. You are not alone. Help is here, and all you got to do is show up, and that's it. You are not alone. Any veteran in the state of Idaho that thinks they're alone, it's a damn lie.
Man, you're a great man, Tony. You have a great, incredible story. Thank you for all you did in your 24 years of the Army, and thank you for what you've done with your really inspiring life and being willing to share it with us.
Definitely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
It's an
thanks,
honor.
Tony.
Thanks for joining us for the Mission 43 podcast. Our purpose is to provide you opportunities to lead, learn, and inspire throughout your Idaho communities.
We want to hear what you thought. Like, subscribe, or leave a comment below.